It was Sunday dinner in South Carolina. The table was full roast chicken, cornbread, mashed potatoes, green beans. I reached for my grandson's hand, smiled at his little sister. "Let's thank the Lord," I whispered before we eat. I closed my eyes, ready to say the prayer I had spoken for decades. But before I could finish, Camila's voice cut sharp cold as the knife beside her plate. "Stop it, Olivia! Don't teach my kids those outdated things anymore." The fork slipped from my hand. The room froze. James looked down, staring at his mashed potatoes, not daring to lift his eyes. The children blinked at me, confused, still holding my hand, small fingers trembling inside mine. My chest ached, not from the years, but from a wound deeper than any sickness. Faith had been my shelter since I was a young widow raising James alone here in South Carolina. Through hurricanes, empty cupboards, and long nights of loneliness, a simple prayer before supper kept us standing. And now, my own daughter-in-law was silencing me at my own table. "Camila," I whispered, barely finding my breath, "it's only a blessing. A moment to be thankful." She leaned back, her arms crossed, her lips pressed tight. "I don't want my kids tied down to old beliefs. They'll choose their own way, not yours." Her words cut deeper than the November wind that sweeps through our porch each fall. The collard greens grew cold. The cornbread sat untouched. The room heavy with silence. My grandson tugged at my hand. "Grandma," he whispered softly, "can we still pray? Just you and me." Tears stung my eyes. I had no answer. The table in South Carolina, once filled with laughter, now felt like a courtroom, and I the guilty one on trial for my faith. If you've ever felt pushed aside in your own family, if you've sacrificed for years only to be silenced at your own table, stay with me. Because this story isn't over. And maybe you'll see a piece of your own life here. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe so we can walk through these stories together. My name is Olivia. I'm 68 years old. I've lived in South Carolina my whole life. This house we sit in tonight, it isn't mine. It belongs to my son, James. James is 42. Tall, kind-hearted, always working long hours at the insurance office downtown. I raised him here in this very state. After his father passed when James was only 12, it was just him and me. We survived on casseroles, hand-me-down clothes, and faith. Always faith. Now James has his own family. A wife, Camila, and 2 beautiful children, a boy who just turned 8 and a girl about to be 5. They call me Grandma Liv. It makes my heart soften every time they say it. Camila, my daughter-in-law, she was born in Texas. Moved to Charleston for college, met James at a summer cookout. She's younger than James, full of energy, full of ideas about how things should be done. She keeps the house spotless, runs the schedule, tight school piano lessons, soccer practice, bedtime, at 8:30 sharp. To the neighbors, we must look picture perfect. The white porch swing. The neat front lawn. The smell of barbecue on weekends. But if you sit at our table, you'd notice the cracks. Not in the walls, but in the way we speak to one another. I came to live with them after my health declined a little. The doctor said I should avoid climbing too many stairs. My old house had 3 levels. James insisted Mom move in with us. "You'll have your own room. It'll be easier." I agreed. Not because I wanted comfort, but because I missed hearing my grandchildren's laughter every day. At first, it felt warm. Like family should be. Dinner together, board games on Friday nights, church on Sundays, at least when James could convince Camila to join. But slowly, things began to change. Camila grew distant, careful with her words. The children sometimes whispered to me, "Mom says you're old-fashioned." And tonight, when she snapped at me for simply praying, I felt the full weight of being a guest in the very home where I thought I belonged. I know Camila believes she's protecting her children. She doesn't want them bound by tradition. She wants them free, her version of free. But what she calls old-fashioned, I call gratitude. What she calls control, I call faith. I am Olivia. I have lived long enough to see hurricanes tear roofs off homes, see neighbors lose everything, but cling to God's promise. And here in South Carolina, where Sunday sermons still echo through church bells, I never imagined that my own family table would become a place where prayer is forbidden. When Camila called me old-fashioned, her words cut deep, because she doesn't know what I've lived through. She doesn't know the nights I spent praying not for tradition, but for survival. I was 24 when my husband passed. James was only 12. We lived in a small house outside Charleston. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that smelled of fried okra and sweet tea. Money was tight. I worked double shifts at the diner on Main Street, sometimes 12 hours straight on my feet carrying trays heavier than my own body could bear. But I smiled, because every dollar meant James could have new shoes or a school trip or a birthday cake that didn't come from a discount aisle. I remember walking 2 miles in the pouring rain because my old Chevy broke down. My shoes soaked through, my hands numb. But when I opened the door and saw James asleep at the table, books spread around him, face resting on his arms, I felt rich. Not in money, but in purpose. Every night before bed, I would place my hand on James's shoulder and whisper a prayer. Lord, keep him safe. Make him strong. Help him become a good man. That prayer carried me through every shut-off notice, every empty fridge, every sleepless night. When James graduated high school, I stood in the back of the gym holding a camcorder I had bought secondhand from a pawn shop. My hands shook so badly that most of the video is blurry. But I didn't care, because I caught the moment he walked across that stage. The announcer said, "James Carter, honor student." And I cried harder than the day I buried his father. College wasn't easy. We couldn't afford the dorms. So James commuted 30 miles each way. I packed him sandwiches, ham and cheese wrapped in wax paper. I slipped in little notes, "Keep going, son. Mom is proud." When he finally landed a job, bought his first car, I sat in the passenger seat while he drove me down Highway 17. The windows rolled down, music on the radio, wind in my hair. I thought we made it. My boy has a future. And all through those years, one thing never changed. Before every meal, whether it was beans and rice or a Thanksgiving turkey that took all my savings, we prayed. Not out of habit, but because gratitude was the only wealth we had. So when Camila tells me not to pray with my grandchildren, I hear more than just her voice. I hear the world saying that sacrifice means nothing, that gratitude is outdated, that faith has no place at a family table. But I know better, because I've lived it. Without faith, James and I wouldn't be here today. The night after that dinner, I sat alone in my room. The lamp by my bedside flickered softly. The house was quiet, but my heart was loud. I could still hear Camila's words. Don't teach my kids those outdated things. Outdated faith is not a fashion. It doesn't go out of style like last season's shoes. It is bread on the table. It is breath in the morning. It is what kept me alive all these years. But James, my only son, he said nothing. He sat there, head down, as if silence could protect him from choosing sides. The next morning, I stood in the kitchen. Camila's making coffee, measuring out 2 scoops into the machine. She didn't look at me. She just stirred in her creamer, clicked on her phone, scrolling through headlines. I tried to be gentle. "Camila, I said softly. I don't want to upset you. But prayer. It's part of who I am. She set down her cup. Her eyes met mine, sharp as broken glass. And part of who I am, she said, is raising my kids without pressure, without someone else's beliefs pushed onto them. Her words stung. But more than her words, it was her tone. As if I were an intruder in her own home. I wanted to remind her. This roof above her head, these walls were only possible because I sacrificed for James. But I bit my tongue, because arguing wouldn't heal anything. Later that week, it was Wednesday supper. Spaghetti garlic bread, a tossed salad in a wooden bowl. The kids rushed in chairs, scraping across the floor. I smiled, ready to hold their hands and whisper a blessing. But Camila's hand shot up. Not tonight, she said firmly. Kids, sit down. We're eating now. My granddaughter looked at me, her eyes wide, as if asking permission to pray anyway. I gave her a small nod, but Camila noticed. Mom, she said to me, using that word sharp, not soft, don't undermine me. Not in front of my children. The room went silent again. James twirled spaghetti on his fork, eyes fixed on his plate. I felt like shouting, like asking him, do you remember, James, every meal we prayed together, every storm we survived because of faith? But the words stayed locked in my throat. That night, as I washed dishes, I heard them talking in the living room. Camila's voice hushed. She keeps bringing it up. I don't want the kids confused. James answered, but so quiet I could barely hear. Camila. She means well. She means control, Camila shot back. She wants them to live her way, not ours. Her way was gratitude. Her way was strength. Her way was survival. I stood by the sink, water running over my hands, hot enough to sting. The house smelled of tomato sauce, but all I could taste was bitterness. For the first time since moving in, I felt unwelcome. Not by the children, not by James, but by the woman he chose to share his life with. The breaking point came on a Friday night. The week had been long. James worked late. Camila rushed from soccer practice to piano lessons, then back home. The kids were restless. I could feel the tension before we even sat down. The table was set. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, biscuits warm from the oven. I took a deep breath. I had been silent long enough. As James reached for his fork, I placed my hand over his. Wait, I said softly. Before we eat, I want to say grace. James froze. Camila dropped her napkin onto the table, her eyes sharp, her jaw clenched tight. Olivia, she said flatly. We've talked about this. Please don't. My voice trembled, but my heart felt steady. Camila, I have stayed quiet. I have respected your space. But this is not just tradition. This is who I am. The children looked between us. Forks hovered above plates. The air heavy. Camila leaned forward. Who you are is not the issue. The issue is my kids. I will not let them be raised with your outdated practices. I felt my cheeks burn, but I would not sit silent anymore. Outdated, I said firmly. Gratitude is never outdated. Faith is not poison. It is love. It is hope. It is the reason your husband even had the strength to build this home. James's hand slipped from mine. He stared down as if the wood grain on the table might offer him an escape. James, I said quietly, look at me. He lifted his eyes blue like his father's, but clouded with fear. Do you remember, son, every meal when it was just us, the lights turned off because we couldn't pay the bill, the two of us holding hands, praying in the dark? His lips parted, but no words came. Camila cut in. That was your choice, Olivia. Your life. But these children, they're mine. And I will decide what they believe. The words struck like a hammer, not because she claimed control, but because James said nothing. I straightened my back. My voice no longer shook. I have loved this family. I have given my life for James. And I will not apologize for teaching gratitude, for teaching love, for teaching faith. Camila's eyes narrowed. You're making this harder than it has to be. I met her stare. Camila's silence is harder. Pretending my heart doesn't ache is harder. Watching my grandchildren be denied the gift of thankfulness that is hardest of all. The children sat frozen, my granddaughter's small hands clutching her biscuit eyes wide with fear. James finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Mom, please, not at the table. It was not anger that broke me. It was those words, spoken by the boy who once begged me to pray over his exams, over his first car, over every challenge he faced. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate. If my prayer offends this home, I said, then I will keep it inside my heart. But know this, you cannot erase gratitude. Not from me. Not from them. Camila exhaled sharply, as if she had won. But I did not feel defeated, because for the first time, I had spoken. The kitchen clock ticked louder than any sound in the room. The fried chicken sat untouched, gravy cooling in its bowl, the biscuits growing hard. Camila's eyes stayed locked on me. James's silence weighed heavier than the cast-iron skillet cooling on the stove. Finally, I spoke. James, you are my son. You know what prayer means. Will you really let it vanish from your children's lives? His fork clattered to the plate. I can't keep fighting, Mom. I just want peace. Peace without faith, I whispered, is not peace at all. Camila slammed her palm against the table. The salt shaker tipped, spilling white grains like snow. This has to stop, she snapped. My kids will not be raised with fear, with guilt, with superstition. Her words echoed, bouncing off the walls, stinging sharper than any slap. My granddaughter gasped softly. Tears welled in her eyes. Mommy. Grandma's not scary. She just says, thank you. The innocence in her voice cut deeper than Camila's anger. Camila turned to her daughter, her tone softer but firm. Sweetheart, you don't understand. Grandma believes things that don't matter anymore. I could not stay seated. I rose from my chair, my hands trembling, but my voice strong. They matter. I said they matter because gratitude is never out of season. Because faith is not fear, it is love. It is strength. It is the very reason your husband stands here today. James looked up, his face pale, his lips pressed tight. Don't drag me into this, he muttered. But I pressed on. James, you know the truth. Every night of your childhood, every storm we weathered, we prayed. And you are here alive, healthy, strong because of those prayers. The children stared wide-eyed. The little boy whispered, Daddy, is that true? James swallowed hard. His fork lay forgotten. His hands clenched together. Camila jumped in. Don't confuse them. This is exactly why I don't want prayer here. It's manipulative. It's pressure. They deserve freedom. Freedom without gratitude, I said, is emptiness. Freedom without faith is just noise. Camila's voice rose. This is my house, Olivia. You don't get to decide. You don't get to preach here. Her words struck like thunder. But I stood my ground. This may be your house, but this is my family. And I will not be silent about love, about thankfulness, about faith. The children began to cry, their tears dripping onto plates, their little hands clutching mine under the table. James pushed back his chair, the legs scraping loud against the hardwood floor. Enough, he shouted. Both of you. You're tearing this family apart. His voice broke raw with exhaustion. Camila's eyes glistened, her breathing sharp. I could see the fear behind her anger. I wanted to reach for her hand, to remind her I was not her enemy. I was her family too. But the words stuck. The moment stretched. The room heavy as stone. The biscuits grew cold. The gravy thickened. But the fight was far from over. The air was thick heavy as August heat in Carolina. James's voice still echoed enough. You're tearing this family apart. Camila's hands trembled. My heart pounded, but before I could speak, a small voice broke the silence. Daddy? It was my granddaughter. Her cheeks wet, her biscuit forgotten on the plate. Daddy, Grandma's prayer makes me feel safe. It's not scary. It's just thank you. The room froze. Her little brother nodded, wiping his nose with his sleeve. Yeah, he whispered. I like when Grandma prays. Camila's face paled. Her eyes darted to James, then back to the children. That's not the point, she said quickly. You don't understand. But the children pressed on. Mommy, my granddaughter said softly, why can't we just say thank you like Grandma does? Camila's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her own daughter's innocence had done what my words could not. James lowered his head, his shoulders heavy. He rubbed his forehead as if trying to hide the tears. I reached for the children's hands. Tiny fingers curled into mine. Warm, trusting, unshaken by grown-up arguments. Sweetheart, I whispered to my granddaughter, thank you for speaking truth. Sometimes the smallest voices say the biggest things. The clock ticked louder. No one moved. Even the house seemed to hold its breath. Then, from the corner of the table, James finally spoke. His voice cracked, but it carried weight. I remember Mom, he said. I remember those nights. I remember the prayers. And they did matter. Camila turned to him, her eyes wide. James? But he lifted his hand. Camila, listen. I've stayed quiet too long. I didn't want to fight. But silence hasn't brought peace. It's only hurt Mom. And now it's hurting the kids. Her lips trembled. I saw her eyes glisten. Behind her, anger, fear lived. She whispered, I don't want them to grow up feeling forced. James reached for her hand. Prayer isn't force, Camila. It's choice. It's gratitude. And maybe we should let them see it and decide for themselves. The children's faces lit up. Hope flickered in their eyes like fireflies in a Carolina dusk. For the first time in weeks, I felt the air lighten. The walls of this house didn't feel so tight. I squeezed the children's hands, my heart swelling. Not because I had won, but because truth, pure, gentle truth, had found its way through innocent voices. Camila leaned back silent, her hands still in James's. The gravy was cold. The biscuits stale. But something warmer had returned to the table. The room had gone quiet, James still holding Camila's hand. The children leaned against me, their little faces calm again. But Camila's eyes, they were somewhere far away. Her lips pressed tight, her chest rising heavy. Finally, she whispered, You don't understand. I'm not trying to be cruel. Her voice cracked soft but sharp with memory. When I was a girl back in Texas, my parents forced us to pray. Every single meal. Every night before bed. It wasn't choice. It wasn't love. It was punishment. I blinked, taken aback. She went on, fingers twisting her napkin, her words spilling like water from a broken faucet. My father, he used prayer as a weapon. If we misbehaved, he'd make us kneel for hours. If I asked questions, he said I lacked faith. If I cried, he said God was disappointed. Her voice broke. Tears slid down her cheeks. I promised myself. My kids would never feel that. Never feel trapped by faith like I did. The truth hit me harder than her anger ever had. It wasn't hatred of prayer. It was fear. Fear of the chains she once wore as a child. I softened. My anger melted into something else, compassion. Camila, I whispered, I didn't know. I never meant to stir those wounds. She wiped her cheek quickly as if ashamed of the tears. I just don't want them hurt. I want them free. James squeezed her hand. Camila, you never told me. I wish you had. I would have understood. The children looked confused. Mommy, the little boy said prayer with Grandma isn't scary. It feels nice. Like saying thank you when someone gives you cookies. Camila gave a shaky laugh, half tears, half relief. Sweetheart, that's not what it was for me. But maybe it can be different for you. I reached across the table, my old hands trembling, but steady in spirit. Camila, faith is not punishment. Not in this home. It is love. It is gratitude. It is freedom, the kind that comes from knowing you are never alone. She stared at me, her eyes searching mine. For the first time, I saw not anger, but the face of a woman still carrying scars. The kind you can't see, but you can feel every time someone says pray. The biscuits were cold, the gravy thick, but the truth on the table was hotter than any meal. Camila lowered her eyes. I don't know if I can forget. But maybe I can try to see it through their eyes. James leaned back, relief washing over his face. Camila, that's all we need. Not agreement. Just openness. Just love. I squeezed the children's hands, my heart pounding with hope. The fight had revealed something none of us expected. Not stubbornness. Not control. But a wound finally spoken out loud. And sometimes speaking, the wound is the first step toward healing. The days after that night felt lighter. Not perfect. Not without tension. But lighter. Camila grew softer in the way she spoke. Less sharp, more listening. James began to speak up. Not to argue, but to keep peace. To protect me, to respect me. The children, they carried hope into every corner of the house. Laughter across the yard. Chalk drawings on the driveway. Small bedtime prayers whispered before sleep. One evening, James sat beside me on the porch swing. The Carolina sunset painted the pines in gold. Mom, he said quietly, I stayed silent too long. You deserved respect, not silence. Tears filled my eyes. But this time they were tears of healing. Son, I whispered, I see your heart. And that is enough. Camila stepped outside carrying 2 mugs of tea. One for me. One for her. She handed it over, her eyes steady. Olivia, she said softly, I can't erase my past. But I promise not to let fear steal love from this family. Not anymore. I took her hand. Camila, that is enough. Faith grows in many ways. But love is the soil that makes it bloom. Camila was no longer an enemy. She faced her wounds and began to heal. James was no longer silent. He found his voice again, both as husband and as son. And me, I was no longer silenced. I was Olivia. Mother. Grandmother. A woman who carried faith through storms and loss, and found it again at her family's table. So I ask you, if this were your table, if you were James, would you stay silent or speak truth? If you were Camila, would you hold to fear or let love heal you? And if you were me, would you keep quiet or finally speak from your heart? If you've ever felt silenced in your own family, if you've ever wondered whether faith and gratitude still belong in today's world, remember this. Stories like mine are not just stories. They are reminders. They are questions. They are hope. If this story touched you, don't walk away in silence. Subscribe so you and I can meet again in the next story.